Well, now, if only you knew how much I've been looking forward to bringing our next guest onto the show. It's Pauline Longdon. Pauline, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, thanks for inviting me. It's awesome to be here.
It's more awesomer that you're on the show, I can tell you. Now, if I put Pauline Longdon into Google search, the Australia Google search at least anyway, because we're both in Australia.
Yeah.
Here's what comes up. Copywriter, the Copy Alchemist, retired Australian Army Major, knowledge nuggets. And I also know here that you've been mentoring with a very well-known copywriter in copywriting circles, Paris Lampropoulos.
Yeah.
AWA. There's so many things. I want to ask you, how defined are we by the things we do?
Well, that's a really interesting thing, because like you've already said a couple of things there that I don't really identify with anymore, like the Army Major. Yeah, I retired, and that feels like it was a lifetime ago. Yeah, I've been trained by a lot of different copywriters, but I don't think that I'm the mirror image or the next version of any of them. I think that they've all got bits of their DNA in my DNA, but I'm not completely them. So yeah, it's interesting, like what defines us as our identity, but I think I'm very unique. I don't want to be a mini someone else.
You ain't no mini somebody else to me, I can tell you. And having met you and your partner Rae only last month or the month before up in sunny Queensland there, it was just an absolute delight and a pleasure to see you both, meet you both in person. Now, Pauline, not everybody who's watching you now on YouTube or even listening to you on one of the channels, first of all, they wouldn't know what a copywriter is or what a copywriter does. So for their benefit, what's it about? Yeah,
so a copywriter is a person who just basically writes words that sell. And so it's our job, like as a salesperson, in the face-to-face world, you can read people and you can change your sales message to meet the message that you want to give people. But when you write that on paper, it takes a whole different set of skills to be able to do that, because you're really having a one-sided like conversation with people. So for me, copywriting, it's the classic definition is salesmanship in print, and I think it's salesmanship through you're persuading people through your words, but not manipulating. That's the ethical dilemma that a lot of copywriters have. So yeah, basically it's writing words that make people take an action.
And you're very good at it, because in the international copywriting world, you're well known, almost famous, I would say, as different people are in their different niches. Step offline or step outside the world of copywriting, and Pauline Longdon is Pauline Longdon, but within the world of copywriting, you're well known. And but here's a question: some people used to say salesmen or salespeople are born. Is a copywriter born? Were you born with the skill of copywriting, do you think?
That's very interesting, because I used to be a registered nurse. That was my first profession I went into straight after school. I went to university, became a registered nurse, and I learned how to communicate very well with people. But all my life, Mike, I've always been a storyteller. I've had a ferocious curiosity about humanity and humans, and I'd sit there as a little kid watching the adults speak around me, and I think I had too much awareness at times, because they'd be talking, like my dad was in the Navy, so I lived on Navy bases, and they don't edit themselves. The adults do not edit themselves if a kid's around. So I would just be listening, and then every now and then I just like start to laugh appropriately as the adults laughed, and they'd go, "Oh, she's a bit spooky, that kid." And but really what it was I was just following the flow of the conversation, and then I was like seeing who in the group had the dynamic of the like charismatic storyteller that everyone would be like fixated on. And so I just watched people all my life. Then I got to be a nurse, and then I started to listen to other people's stories and then see the emotions in the stories that people were telling. And I had this spooky ability as a nurse that in between each shift, nurses have what we call a handover. And so you're telling the next shift, you know, what's happening with your patients. And so someone say, yeah, Mrs. Rhubarb is very aggressive today, and she came in by ambulance, blah, blah, blah. We don't know what's going on, but be careful, she's very aggressive. So I'd be given her, and so I'd go and talk to Mrs. Rhubarb. Within 5 minutes, I'd have her life story. And the reason she was aggressive was she wanted to go home. She didn't know whether a cat was locked in her apartment or not. She didn't even know if her apartment was locked. And she had like all of life savings under her mattress. And so obviously she was worried that someone was going to go and steal her life savings. So I've always had like a weird ability to be able to get people's life stories in a very short amount of time, just engaging with them. And that's something that I took into the army as an army major as well. You know, my soldiers weren't performing, and I, you know, instead of standing there and yelling at them, because, you know, that helps the world, I'd say, take a seat, let's have a chinwag about this, let's have a chat, what's really going on. And so then they open up to me. And then got out of the army fairly traumatically, but when we can talk about that if you like, it may help some people. But and then I went into business and then copywriting, and then I realized that empathy and all of the communication skills that I've been developing all my whole life, Mike, were just like gold. It's like I'm just having a meaningful heart-to-heart conversation with someone else, and it works. You know, I don't need any of the copywriting tricks, hacks, shortcuts, and manipulation things to try to have that heart-to-heart communication with people. And it makes a huge difference in people's lives.
It seems that the more successful, or the most successful, certainly the renowned copywriters of the past 50 plus years, seem to almost all have a backstory of pain and suffering of some kind. That's what I've seen and noticed anyway. Would you agree?
I agree. A lot of us, there's been something like you said about being born as a copywriter. I mean, I didn't even know what a copywriter was. Even when I was in the army, when Gary Bencivenga, one of the legends of the world, he was retiring, and everyone who's anyone like was going to become anyone, they were all at that event. And people said, "Did you go to that?" And I went, "I didn't even know what a copywriter was. I was in a twinkle in a copywriter's eye back then." But then obviously then fell into it and loved it. But the more that we, and I know that you've spoken to a lot of them as well, is that the more that we talk to people, we see that there's a common denominator of that relentlessness or resilience, and they overcome adversity. And I think it actually makes, you know, I'm sure there's other better ways to become a good human than having to go through trauma, but let's just use what we've been through to triumph instead of being a victim for the rest of your life.
Yeah, perfectly said. It reminds me of what Joe Vitale, who I know you know of, and
I love the guy. Yeah.
terrific guy, very, very generous with his time. He's been a guest on this show in the past, and he was more known for his marketing and copywriting and internet marketing, etc., in days gone by, as you know, Pauline, and more recently now he's into his law of attraction and that kind of work. But the reason I bring his name up is because of his quote, everybody, quote unquote, everybody's going through something, and it's just a matter of degree. So we want to come back to copywriting, but I want to go back to something that you mentioned, and that was, first of all, you're a retired Australian Army Major. Now, where is Major in the order of ranking?
It's kind of pretty high, actually. Yeah, it is. So as an officer, you're a lieutenant. And by the way, I do say it correctly. In the Army, they're a lieutenant. In the Navy, they're a lieutenant, and they're not the same rank. So then after lieutenant, you become a captain, and then after a while, you then get promoted up to major. And major's not a rank that a lot of people get to. It's not one of those ones that's just like especially in the Australian Army, it's not just an auto promotion. You basically really have to earn it. And because I mean the equivalency in me as a major in the Army as a nurse was a matron of a hospital. and I'm talking about a big hospital. So, but the thing is, in the army, you're a soldier first and you're a nurse second. So you're an army commander, a leader, you know, strategy. Like if the I'll just curb my words, but if the crap hits the fan, you need to be that officer that can step into someone else if they're injured and step into that role as an army commander. So you need to know more than just sitting back being a nurse. And so yeah, that it kind of was quite a big deal to get to where I got to in the army.
And what was that, 1990s, was it, Pauline?
Yeah, 1990s to the early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're well now, you're into 2023 and certainly well into the 21st century. But I can remember, look, first of all, I've had the smallest of tastes of what Australian Army life is like, only because I was in the civilian army, or the Army Reserves as they called it back then.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I got a little bit of a taste, just a small taste of back then of what army life could be like. And it's no comparison to someone who is a regular army soldier or officer, as you were, full-time. In other words, full-time, that's your job. You're an army person full-time. But I'll tell you what comes to mind: misogyny, bastardization, and harsh treatment. Did you experience any of that, especially as a woman?
All of the above, and then more. Let's not take down the energy, but a lot more. I was actually assaulted when I was a young lieutenant by a male major, and yeah, that was horrible. But I guess in that moment you have I guess you got the decision or the choice in life, haven't you? Make yourself into the victim, and I would never have got justice. So I just head down, bum up, and just got on with my life. And then yeah, I dealt with it later. But yeah, Mike, there was all that and bullying. When I was on deployment in East Timor, because yeah, I was deployed on operations and saw warlike service and all that sort of stuff. So it's really kind of like one of those ironic kind of things, walking around with a Red Cross armband on your arm with a fully loaded semi-automatic weapon that basically you're prepared to fire to protect yourself and your patients. And you know, I was very willing, ready and able to do that. But when I was over in East Timor, I had one of my bosses. I was a captain at the time, she was a major. She would ride me every second of the day. And unfortunately for me, in that kind of operation, she was in the same room that I was in. She would eat near me, she would sleep near me, shower near me. Like when people say 24/7, I'm talking about 24/7, constantly, no more than like 4 meters away from me for that amount of time. So, you know, there was no reprieve from her relentless kind of just chipping away at my resolve. And eventually she did, but me being me, because I'm a stubborn mule, I didn't let her show it. I kept it all inside until I got home, and then I fell apart. And that was part of my story of getting out of the army, which was very traumatic.
Well, I'm sorry that that's something you've experienced, but that's part of your story and it's who you are today. And so I remember talking with you in Queensland with your partner Rae, and that something came up the same. It was a conversation like, would there be anything that you'd want to change or something like that? And I remember your answer was something along the lines of, no, because then I wouldn't be who I am today. And
exactly. Yeah, I mean, one of the big things, like, you know, with that bullying and the horrible treatment after that, and then getting promoted and still being bullied and, you know, like downtrodden and all the things that you're talking about, the misogyny, although you try to fight a good fight, sometimes just people play really dirty. And so I fell into a really deep, dark depression, and here's the irony, and it wasn't funny at the time, but it's really funny now. I got promoted to major and then diagnosed with major depression. So it's like, oh, can I just get like a captain's dose of depression? I think I can handle that. But anyway, somewhere in there, I knew that there was still a sense of humor, a bit of a life spark. But yeah, but going through major depression and coming out the other end of it, Mike, it's another ironic thing that the very thing that almost killed me and took me from this earth has helped me to be the human that I am today. And I think really my depression, or the depression, I don't own it anymore, the depression is the very thing that saved my life. And I think I'm here because of it. And like you said, even before we started to record several times, I don't take this for granted. Mike, I don't take anything for granted at all. Like, not my life, not other people's lives. I'm just so grateful still to be here, because when I had major depression, my goodness, I would go to sleep in a puddle of tears, begging God to take my life during the night. And then I'd wake up and breathing, obviously, and then I'd just start crying again, saying, you broke your promise, I don't want to be here. And now I look back and I go, oh, thank you, God, for not listening to the ramblings and the demands of a mad woman. Because man, I look at my life now and I could have missed out on all this. It makes me so sad, but I just know that I was at a really low point. And yeah, but I'm so glad to be here right now. Yeah.
We're so glad that you're here too, Pauline, and I can relate. And well, this is the Comeback Coach podcast show. There's likely to be somebody who's viewing you or listening to you and hearing what you've just said, and maybe they're in the midst of something similar. We would hope not, but it's possible. We don't know who's watching you now, listening to you right now. And your words may be just what somebody needs to hear to make them help them start their comeback journey. Now, I do want to touch on something because really relevant to that. Your depression was severe, and I believe it got so bad that you were on the verge of taking your own life. Is that how bad it got?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll tell you why it got so bad. Because I was such a high functioning individual, I tell people now, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, Mike, about if someone's watching this, because this is why I want to be so candid and be able to speak so transparently, because I know that when I was struggling, I felt like I was the only person in the world going through it. We're not. And depression is a lying cheater. It tells us all the same story, makes us think that we're all special, but we're not. It's lying to us all. But back to why I wanted to kill myself was basically on the day that I was discharged. I couldn't even read or write, Mike. I just signed my discharge papers with a scribble. Wasn't even my signature. I couldn't even remember how to write my name. And so I went out into my car and I went, okay, well, I'm just an oxygen thief and taking up space that someone else can use. And all my friends and family were kind of like mourning the loss of the dynamic exciting me. So I thought, well, I've been told I'm never going to nurse again. I'm always going to have depression. I'm just going to fix up everyone's grief period, and I'm just going to give them something to grieve about, get it overdone, let's go. So on the way home that day, I'd planned it for months. I knew exactly the tree. I knew exactly how fast I'd need to go. My car didn't have an airbag back in those days. And so I was, I turned the corner, knew where the tree was, started to speed up, started to hit the speed, heading towards the tree. And then the next thing, someone yelled in my ears, stop the effing car. So it just like, brakes on, stopped with millimeters to spare. And that was a pivotal part of my life. Because I knew I was a trauma nurse. I know what it looks like when people don't commit suicide properly, and I wouldn't have, just my luck. So I would have been reminded of it every day. So that's what actually made me stop my perfectionism that is so good in copywriting. It's the thing that kept me on the planet. It's like, you're gonna F this up, and it's like, yeah, I wasn't I? But anyway, so yeah, things got really dire, Mike, and But then I determined in that moment that if I was going to have to be here, and it seemed that I did have to be, let's make a life that matters and impact the world as positively and as dynamically as I can. Like, let's lift people up. And so that's why I do what I do, and I love it.
And we love it. I love it, and I love you, and I love you, no bullshit. Now, we can't leave, we're about to leave the army story of Pauline Longdon, but we can't without mentioning your partner, Rae, if that's okay, because you met Rae in
for
the
sure.
army, didn't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, that was part, and it sounds like, oh yeah, she was bullied, so what? No, I was bullied because my my boss was a Christian, and my partner is the same sex as me. And so it was more than just, oh, bully, whatever. It was vilification. She sent me to hang out with the padre, which is a priest in the chapel, to try to pray the gay away and all that sort of stuff. And so Rae is, she's like my absolute rock in my life. And I look back, Mike, and I think, if there was only one thing that I was meant to do in the army, that was to meet Rae, then everything was freaking worth it, because, oh my God, just an amazing human. And
now I see you two. Now, to me, this is why I have to bring Rae up, because those of us who know you, love you, and see you, know, love, and see Rae as well. You're joined at the hip almost, and so we have to mention Rae. So you better tell me, Pauline, because I've been wondering this, because every photo of you and Rae, you're smiling, you're beaming, and people who write about you after, and Rae after, write up an account of meeting you both. Everybody speaks so highly. Now, I've got to ask you, don't you ever argue? Don't you two ever not get on?
Of course we do. I mean, that's every couple, isn't it? But yeah. I don't know, Rae and I, we've gone on this a massive healing journey. Like, if I look back at when we first met, I was a captain, she was a corporal, she was a drill and a small arms coach. She was like a recruit instructor. She scared the crap out of me, and she was a lower rank than me. And then I look at her and I back then, and I go, we had no idea that this future was ahead for us, but we keep evolving and growing into this amazing potential that neither of us really knew that we had. And I think, Mike, what happens is that we just allow each other to grow in the way that we need to. And the way that I talk about Rae and my relationship is we're like train tracks. We're parallel to each other. But the thing is that train tracks, you need two of them to do the job. So there is that, but we're not on top of each other. We are parallel to each other, and like train tracks occasionally cross over, or they join for a little bit, but then they go on their own way. And so for us, our relationship is very much enough similarities and likeness to get us together and then keep us together, and then enough differences to keep things interesting, and instead of having that like smothering kind of relationship. But I mean, yeah, we do have arguments and harsh words. But also the other thing is that, here's the thing about relationships. A lot of the times our relationships are not with us. It's like our parents and their parents coming together. And so every now and then Rae and I go, your mother's in the relationship. Oh, sorry. It's like, so then you just change that. So that's something that we've worked out that helps us. But another thing that we do is we're in love with each other. Or, if you're in a relationship, you're in love with your partner. But try to find something each day that makes you love them just that little bit more. Because really, if you look at love and the emotions and the chemical responses, the peptides and all that sort of stuff, all down to the molecular level, it's a release of molecules that it is. So it's kind of like, I'd hate to say that's an addiction, but let's just say it's a chemical reaction. That chemical reaction sometimes wears off. So what Rae and I do, and what we tell other people, we don't tell, we advise or suggest that other people do, is just find something each day, or at least, very least once a week, something that you just look at your partner and you go, oh, I really love that person. Yeah.
That's good, Pauline. Say hello to Rae for me when we get off the call, please.
I will, yeah.
Now, all right. So that's the army. And so coming out of the army straight away with depression and the experience that almost ended your life but didn't, and then took you on another path. And then you progressed, correct me if I'm wrong in the timeline, but you found yourself very much in the spiritual circle and actually becoming a spiritual coach.
Yeah, spiritual teacher, coach, and practitioner. What that was about, Mike, was when I just before I got out of the army, and this is actually what made me get out of the army, was the medication they had me on was it was like a dinosaur dose. Like, I look back now and the dose that they had me on and how little I was at the time, it's like was incompatible with me. So anyway, I had a very bad drug reaction to it, and then I just went, you know what, I'm not taking this anymore. So when I did get out, I was drug free. I refused to take any more antidepressants after they nearly killed me with overdosing me. So then I started to look around, because I went, well, you know, with the promise to myself, if you're gonna have to be here, do something with your life. And it's like, well, I need to get over this depression. Like, I refuse to have this for the rest of my life. So then I just started going down the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland and trying to find something that could help me. I went into things like NLP, then I found some different healing modalities. One of them that I got really good at and was quite high up in Australia, but I don't really talk about it because I don't resonate with it anymore. I don't want people to do that based on something that I did like 15 years ago. So that's why. Say again.
Amway?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
It's a joke.
Yeah, I know. Don't worry, I did Amway.
I think we all have it some stage.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I went on the spiritual quest, was to better myself. But as I started to better myself, it's like the ripple effect, like what you do in the center has a ripple effect out, and people were looking at me going, holy moly, Pauline, what are you doing to yourself? And even Rae, like, what are you doing? And before that, she's like, keep that spiritual mumbo jumbo away from me, because she's so pragmatic and very left-brained. And then it's like, oh, can you do that to me? And I went, yeah, for sure. Then I did it. And she's going, this is good. Then people would say, can you do it to me? I'll pay you for it. And I went, oh, well, I didn't think about that. So then it became a business. And then the evolution was, would you teach me how to do it? Okay, I'll teach you. So I went to America, got my qualifications and everything. And then people said, oh, can you coach me how to have a business in it? I went, of course. So, and I've noticed that that's kind of the kind of like a cycle or a pattern that I do. It's like, I do it for myself, then I teach it, then people want me to do it for them. Then it's, can you teach me? And then it's, can you teach me and take me to the next level? And so I've done that in, in the army, nursing, business, that spiritual business, and now copywriting as well. So it's just this constant cycle. I rather like it. Yeah.
I think your copywriting started, correct me again if I'm wrong, around 2012 or something around there?
Yeah, a bit earlier than that. That was when I started to write for other people. That was that phase where people say, hey, could you do that for me? I'll pay you for it. Mike, I didn't actually really want to be a copywriter to write for other people. I did it for my spiritual business, because I looked at it and I went, man, I think this could be $1 million business here if I can market it properly. So I learned marketing first. And then I tried to find a copywriter to write the copy for me. And because it was woo-woo, they wrote it and I sounded like an idiot and a charlatan and a snake oil seller. So I just went, can you please rewrite this? And they said, if you think you can do better, then go and do better. And I went, honest to goodness, I don't think I can do anything worse than that. So let's have it, as we say in Australia, let me have a crack at that. Or here, hold my beer and let's see what happens. Well, I did it. And then people started to go, who's writing your copy? I went, me? And then they went, can you write mine? I went, yeah. And at that stage, something had happened in my spiritual business that kind of like just tanked it overnight. Like the credibility went out because of something external to what I was doing. The the person who developed it kind of did something that had like a ripple effect, more like an earthquake, like a 9.0 earthquake throughout our community. And I was one of the ones, and I just went, you know what, I don't need this. I'm going to go into copywriting. I took it as a sign that that was not the right path. So move on. So I did. So I'm happy that happened, actually.
In the early days of you becoming a copywriter, as in a copywriter for hire, did anybody say to you, well, I'd hire you if you were a man?
Well, not as blatantly as that, but yeah, there was some of those conversations. And in fact, when I declared to a couple of people that I wanted to be a copywriter, they said, oh, females don't make good copywriters, or don't get your hopes up. There aren't any really great female copywriters here in Australia. And as misogynistic as that sounds like, they were right. You looked around and where were they? But then again, that's like a red flag to a bull for me. So it's like, I'll show you.
And you have, and you continue to do so. AWAI, American Writers and Artists, Inc., you're involved with their training as a consumer of their many wonderful products on writing, not just copywriting, but writing in general.
Yeah.
A lot of it is copywriting. And so much so that, I mean, you really invested in some of their top programs. The Circle program comes to mind. And because of your contacts with the people at the helm of AWAI, you were invited to speak at one of the AWAI conferences, weren't you?
Yeah. So, and also as a mentor, that's where I started mentoring, was AWAI gave me a break, and I thought, hey, I can actually do this. But yeah, I did speak at one of their events a few years ago, before the world was closed down. And yeah, I had a member spotlight, and it was only like 10 minutes, but I was determined to make a mark, and by golly, I did. It was a very surreal experience. I had a standing ovation, almost not a dry eye in the place, and yeah, just really connected with people at a very, very deep level. And in fact, people who were in that room still remember that talk that I did. It still gives them goosebumps, which is quite amazing.
Congratulations for that. And
thank you.
Is that on YouTube somewhere, or do you have that up somewhere?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a very ordinary recording, because I think Rae just recorded it on her iPhone. But yeah, that's definitely on YouTube. I think it's on my thing, the Copy Alchemist, if you search for that.
I might I'm going to grab the link actually and put it in the show notes, so that the viewer or the listener can drop down, click on it, and watch Pauline's 10 or so minute presentation to a room full of fellow writers and writers in study, and the standing ovation, and that you see the people wiping the tears from their eyes. Well, now you've got a couple of books published. I mean, you're a real published author, as opposed to having a book. You're real published, and the most recent book is the compilation of 2 years of, is it weekly or monthly newsletters you email to your subscribers? Yeah,
so it's actually this book here, and it's I'll grab it.
Please do.
Yeah. Okay, so this is my knowledge nuggets. Each week I send out an email to my list, and so I've been doing this for now. I'm in my 8th year, and this is the first year, and so these are the emails from like 2015. But the funny thing is that it's evergreen knowledge, and it's kind of like my Pauline's perspective on life and the universe. And anyway, so I only talk about 3 topics in those knowledge nuggets: marketing, copywriting, and mindset. They're the 3 things that I talk about.
Interesting. First of all, 8 years. I'm on your list. I didn't know I haven't been on it for 8 years, but I've read most of them. I confess I haven't read every one of them, but I've read most of the ones that drop in. And sometimes I'm so moved by what I do read. I as you know, I send you a little note that says whatever. So we will include a link through to that book as well, but also we'll pop a link through to how people who don't currently receive your weekly knowledge nuggets, they can subscribe. It's free, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can stay as long as you like. I never take that for granted. So if you get bored, you can just unsubscribe at any time. It's cool.
When I put in Pauline Longdon into the Google search bar, the first thing that comes up in the search results is your website, the Copy Alchemist. Where did you get the name the Copy Alchemist, and why?
Well, the funny thing is that I didn't name myself that. I didn't think, well, nowadays I think that I've earned it, but at the time I didn't. But really what it was Rae was looking for a name, because like there was the Pete Godfrey's, like the Wizard of Words, and there was all these other people like making up names, and people trying to call me the Wizardress of Words, and I'm going, oh, do I have to be like married to the Wizard of Words? It's like, I don't need that stuff. And then what about the Witch of Words? I'm going, yeah, no, that's not really going to be palatable. Anyway, so then Rae said, well, you're all into metaphysics. Like, seriously, why don't you do that? And I said, oh, because it's a bit woo-woo. And so she said, well, what about the Copy Alchemist? And I went, I like the idea of alchemy. I've always been interested in alchemy. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. You know, that's a lovely book. And so she said, why can't you just be the Copy Alchemist? And I said, okay, let's see how that goes. But then really when I started to explore it a bit more, Mike, it's really copy alchemy for me is like turning words into cash or words into wealth. You know, like the alchemist would be trying to turn lead into gold. Well, we don't exactly use a pencil when we write copy, but it's kind of that, you know, from the foundations of, you know, crafting the words that we use and then turning it into gold for other people. Yeah, it really fits quite nicely. And like you, and this is where I'm super impressed with you doing your doctorate of metaphysics. You enrolled and you reminded me that I wanted to do that over 10, 12 years ago. And so I just jumped in. So there you go. I'm single white femaling you, copying your lead, because I remembered that was a part of me that I'd left behind, that metaphysical stuff. But with the metaphysical side and the copy alchemy, Mike, it's all about the energy of words and making sure that you get that right. Because as I said, when you use that superpower for good, you don't have to trick people to buy stuff. They'll buy it because they feel like you hear them and you understand their need. And for me, copywriting and the copy alchemy is just, you know, identifying that someone's got a need. The person you're writing for has got the solution, and you just build a pathway that brings them together. And that's it.
The energy of words. I tell you something, Pauline, you've got the energy of life working with you, and there's no doubt about that whatsoever. And you're working with the energy of life as well. And that's why things appear to, from an outsider looking in, appear that everything is mostly a bowl of cherries for Pauline Longdon and Rae Brent. I mean, who would have thought that you're now flying, what are those flying cameras called?
Drones.
Drones, you're into drone. Come on, you better just tell us about your drone hobby.
Oh, yeah, like I love photography and all of it. I just love taking different perspectives of the world. And I've got a really lovely camera that I've been using for years and taking photos of everything. And then I thought, what's the next level? What could I possibly do that's going to show people a different perspective of the world? And then I went, a drone. And so I was helping a client with a copywriting client. He was writing for a drone company, and I went, that's it. I'm getting a drone. So then I got really excited about it, and I just love it. I just love seeing the world from a whole different perspective.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine that would be terrific, running operating a drone and spying on your neighbours, but that's me.
None of that. My neighbors are pretty damn boring, actually.
Well, Pauline, I really do thank you. We thank you for joining us on the Comeback Coach show and the podcast, and our viewers and our listeners who have watched you, viewed you and listened to you can drop down into the show notes and click on the several links down there to your website, to the YouTube of your talk at AWAI. Back in what year was that? 2016, I think you said.
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah. Maybe 2019 or 2018. I'm not sure.
Before COVID?
Yeah.
And there'll be a link to the Amazon link through, excuse me, an Amazon link through to a copy. Better hold your book up again.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
There
show and tell.
That's the way. Knowledge nuggets. Beautiful. How many pages is that, by the way? It looks rather thick.
It is. It's about like 200 and, before you get to the other bit, it's about 260 pages. But here's the thing, Mike, I hate to tell you, but this is volume 1. We're already working on volume 2. That's going to be coming out in the next month.
Oh, wow, how exciting. And Rae, when you say we, because Rae is the editor of the book, is she not?
Oh, she's compiling it. She's the magic behind it. If that was up to me, that book would not exist. Like, I'm happy to write the weekly emails, but anything beyond that. So she actually surprised me with that book. She goes, hey, I've got something to show you. And I cried. I just cried. I just went, this is the most amazing gift ever. Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. Well, let's just summarize here before I ask for some parting. Normally, if you have a quote or something like that, but I just want to say this to the viewer or to the viewer and listener, Pauline, directly. So some years ago, Pauline was so down that she aimed her car at the tree and sped at high speed, and just for that split second stopped. Had she not, none of this would have been happening today. But what's happened since then is the more important point to make. The comeback since then, and just look and listen to the parts of Pauline's story that should tell you, if you are in that dark place right now and you are void of hope and suffering and you can't fathom going on, do go on, don't give up. And there's always somebody that can help. And so reach out to somebody, whether it's a professional or a neighbor, or just talk to somebody. Pauline, would you have a parting thought? Do you have a favorite quote, something you can leave our listeners and viewers with?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, but if I had to boil it down to the conversation we were having today, I think, with the moment that you said that could have changed my life. Well, it did change my life, but it was like a sliding doors moment. There was one where it would have been death. The other one was like, going on is, and it sounds cliche, but I don't think it is, because when you live it, breathe it, and be it, nothing's cliche. And that is, this too shall pass. Now, there's a guided message in that, or there's a hidden message, is that this too shall pass. The negative stuff will pass, but also the positive stuff passes. So make sure that you enjoy the positive while you've got it, and never take anything for granted. But also the other thing is that, don't think that something's going to last forever. It doesn't have to define you. Your past doesn't have to define you, confine you. Just know that you can just keep moving forward.
Thank you, Pauline. And this moment is something I've not taken for granted, I can assure you. Thank you, Pauline Longdon. And to you, the viewer, to the listener, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Comeback Coach podcast. Until next time, this is Mike Searles signing off.